Question again about where is the origin of darkness, the first act of darkness?
On this planet, there is not as such a first act of darkness, but there is the disconnect from source that created a partial shadow on beings, human beings, that facilitated their movement away from source, their connection to source, their memory of source, and created a feeling of separation and loss, which they turned into a search for these parts outside of self. And as this search did not fulfill the emptiness and the loss, they replaced what we will call genuine connection with source. They replaced with a physical gratification of the sense of power over another human being.
So they used that to replace the love that they missed from source?
Yes,
If you
it was a twisted version
right.
of conditional behavior and love, because in this action they could drop self-responsibility and make someone else responsible for how bad they felt.
And that felt better?
It never felt better, but it became physically gratifying to create a chemical reaction that was momentarily exhilarating. And this can happen in a lower frequency body where negative action can spark a chemical reaction which is fleeting, that feels fulfilling for the receiver, but it takes the person further away from the light and into darker climes. And they have to, just as an addict does, do more to gratify themselves. And along with this movement from self-awareness and light, the reptilian part of the brain was most reactive to these behaviors and had somehow the capacity to shut off compassion and empathy, so that these acts had to increase and were never felt wrong. So it was a wave, so to speak, in a sense of primitive life that created a knock-on effect these societies. It was a movement away from the creator and source, and they sought out the loss of that connection. In their belief, they were still connected, but they fully believed they were not. And they sought to idolize something outside of themselves. And this is how wars and royalty was formed. And authorities over other people, people being better than, more than.
And this was all unexpected, right? Because Source is pure love.
There was no set expectation when this we like to call it an experiment, though it was not done from ill-gotten means.
Why didn't Source just stay hanging out in pure love instead of creating a possibility of darkness?
Because one does not know how amazing pure love is when one is all engorged in pure love. There is nothing to compare, and Source created a comparison, so it wasn't so much that it wasn't expected for this to happen, it just was not known exactly what would happen, and that with the loss of memory of being from Source, that these acts would create such a turmoil and pain in the bodies.
So in this, it sounds like in creating the dark, accidentally not knowing, Source has actually created more love. Because the love exists now because we can see the difference between the dark and the love.
Absolutely, that was the whole point. It was to, as we said, come from light into dark and back to light, using the dark as the example of moving to light, as the catalyst, as the contrast. There is no growth on this planet without the contrast. That is the vital element, and it was purposeful. It was no accident. I think in some hierarchies below Source, there has been some surprises as to the extreme depths that a human being will go to when so far from the light. But it is not a mistake. And there are ways which they find themselves to get back to Source, even if it be the death of the body they are using. And oftentimes, when the death of a dark perpetrator happens, without any understanding of the darkness they have dwelt in whilst in the physical plane, when they leave the body, they instantly like to return to try and bring balance to their actions, with no judgment of right or wrong, but with an innate urge to get back to the light that they came here to do.
Because when they went back to Source, they realized what they had partaked in.
They realized they hadn't completed their mission that they had left whilst in the dark.
Right.
They didn't have to. It was the excitement of going through another incarnation and finding their way back to the light.
Right.